You know that person who disappears the moment you call, but responds to every text within 5 minutes. The one who seems to have the deepest conversations with you in a chat, but when you see them face to face, everything gets awkward. Yeah, that person isn't being cold. They're not avoiding connection. They're just communicating in the language their brain understands best. And if you're someone who feels more confident behind a screen, who can express yourself better in written words than spoken ones, welcome. You're about to feel very seen. Because today, we're breaking down the psychology of people who prefer to communicate through messages, the ones society calls antisocial, but neuroscience calls something entirely different. Here's the thing. When you're in a conversation face-to-face, your brain has to process everything simultaneously. There's the words being said, yes, but also the tone of voice, the facial expressions, the body language, the speed at which they're speaking, what their eyes are doing, whether they're making you uncomfortable with their closeness. It's overwhelming. Your amygdala is on high alert, scanning for micro-expressions, for rejection, for any sign that you're saying the wrong thing. For some people, this is exciting. Their nervous system thrives on that real-time feedback. But for others, it's sensory overload. Their brain gets flooded, and suddenly they can't access the words they know. They freeze. They blank out. They say something stupid and spend the next 3 hours replaying it. But in a message, everything changes. When you write, you get something face-to-face interactions never give you. Time. You can pause. You can think about what you want to say. You can delete that sentence that didn't sound right and rewrite it. You can check your tone before you send it. You can craft a response that actually represents what you're thinking, instead of whatever panic just vomited out of your mouth. You can craft a response that actually represents what you're thinking, instead of whatever panic just vomited out of your mouth. For people with social anxiety, ADHD, autism, or even just a highly sensitive nervous system, this isn't laziness. This isn't avoidance. This is accessibility. This is the only way their brain can actually communicate at full capacity. There's real neuroscience here. Studies show that people who communicate better in writing often have brains that process language differently. They might be visual thinkers who need to see the words to organize their thoughts. They might be people with slower speech processing who need that buffer time to formulate a response. They might be highly detail-oriented and can't stand the imprecision of verbal conversation, where things get lost, misunderstood, forgotten. When they write, they have control. They can say exactly what they mean. Nothing gets lost in translation, and that matters. It matters a lot. But here's something people don't understand about messaging. It's not surface-level communication. It's often deeper. Think about it. When someone takes the time to write you a thoughtful message, they're not just throwing words at you. They're composing. They're choosing every word. They're thinking about how you'll read it, what you'll feel, whether they're being clear. Some of the most profound conversations happen through text because there's no performance. There's no mask. There's just thought meeting thought across a screen. And that's powerful. Yes, messages can be misunderstood. Without tone of voice, you lose nuance. A joke becomes harsh. A question becomes demanding. A simple statement becomes cold. But here's what's wild. People who communicate primarily through messages develop an almost supernatural ability to use language precisely. They become experts at tone through word choice. They use punctuation, like musicians use dynamics. An ellipsis becomes vulnerability. An exclamation point becomes genuine excitement. They understand that writing is an art form, and they get really, really good at it. Now, there's something else happening here that has nothing to do with anxiety or introversion. Some people prefer messages because they value thoughtful communication over quick reaction. They live in a world where conversation feels like tennis, constantly volleying back and forth, never really landing on anything deep. But messaging allows for longer form thinking. You can send a paragraph. You can send multiple messages. You can build an idea instead of just reacting to the moment. For people who think deeply, who need time to process their emotions, who want conversations that actually mean something, messaging is a gift. It's the only space where their kind of connection is possible. There's also the element of control over your own narrative. In a phone call or face-to-face, you're constantly responding to the other person's energy, their agenda, their schedule. They might interrupt you. They might change the subject. They might make you feel rushed. But in a message, you decide when to engage. You decide if today is a day you have the energy to talk. You decide the pace of the conversation. For people who are drained by other people's expectations, by the pressure to be on all the time, messaging feels like freedom. It feels like finally having a say in how much you give and when. But let's get real about something. Sometimes messages become a hiding place. Sometimes they become a way to avoid genuine connection. There's a difference between someone who prefers writing because it aligns with how their brain works, and someone who hides behind messages because they're afraid of being truly seen. One is self-awareness. The other is avoidance. One person says, I communicate better in writing, and here's why, and I'm working on being present when it matters. The other person says, I don't do calls, period. No flexibility, no growth, just a wall. And that's different. That's when messaging stops being a communication style and starts being a defense mechanism. For truly message-oriented people, though, it's rarely that simple. They often crave real connection. They often want to be close to people. They just need the pathway to be different. They might need to voice call instead of video call. They might need to meet in person after a long message exchange to smooth out the awkwardness. They might need their person to understand that when they choose to be silent, it doesn't mean they don't care. It means their brain is processing. It means they're thinking about how to say something true. And that's okay. Here's what's fascinating. In a world that's becoming increasingly digital, people who prefer messaging are actually ahead of the curve. They've adapted to a communication style that's becoming dominant. They're comfortable with asynchronous communication. They understand context switching. They can manage multiple conversations and keep track of threads and history. These are skills that matter now. Remote work is exploding. Digital communication is the norm. And people who thrive in message-based communication, they're thriving. But there's a shadow side here too. Sometimes this preference becomes isolation. Sometimes messaging becomes the only way someone interacts, and their real-world relationships shrivel. They collect online friends, but feel alone in a room full of people. They can write poetry to someone at 2 a.m, but can't sit across from them at coffee without their hands shaking. And that's when it stops being a communication style and starts being a symptom of something deeper. Loneliness disguised as preference. Disconnection wearing the mask of introversion. The healthiest message-focused people are the ones who understand themselves. They know why they prefer writing. They know their limits and their strengths. They don't use messages as an excuse to avoid growth or real intimacy. Instead, they use them as a tool. They message when that's what their brain needs. They push themselves to call sometimes. They show up in person, even when it's hard. They give people the gift of their presence, knowing it costs them more energy than it costs others. And they do it anyway. That's the sweet spot. That's where communication preference becomes wisdom. And look, there's something beautiful about people who love messaging. They tend to be thoughtful. They tend to listen carefully. They tend to remember what you said 3 weeks ago because they read it again. They tend to check in. They tend to craft responses that show they actually care about your words, not just your company. They give you their words, and for them, words are how they love. They're how they think. They're how they connect. And that's not less than any other way of relating. It's just different. Some of the loneliest people in the world are surrounded by friends who want them to talk more. Some of the most connected people are those who've learned to express themselves through the medium that works for their brain. Maybe you're someone who's been made to feel bad for preferring messages. Like you're not trying hard enough. Like you're lazy or afraid. Like there's something wrong with you. Because you can articulate yourself better when you write. You're not wrong. You're not broken. You're not less than the people who thrive on spontaneous conversation. You're just wired differently. Find those people. The ones who respond to your long messages with equally long responses. The ones who don't make you feel rushed. The ones who celebrate the way you think instead of asking you to perform the way they speak. Those are your people. And when you find them, you'll know. Because suddenly, a 3-paragraph text message won't feel like too much. Suddenly, taking hours to respond won't feel like abandonment. Suddenly, the depth of what you're expressing in writing will be met with the same depth in return. They'll read your words, and they'll understand not just what you're saying, but why you're saying it. They'll notice when you shift your emoji use. They'll read between the lines. They'll understand that your silence isn't rejection, it's processing. They'll send you messages at odd hours because they know you're thinking about something they said days ago, and they want to continue that thread. They won't ask you to be different. They won't make you feel like a burden for needing communication on your terms. Because here's the truth that nobody talks about. We're all just trying to be understood. Every single one of us is carrying around this desperate need to be seen, to be known, to have another person genuinely get what we're trying to say. Most people try to achieve that through proximity, through being present, through talking and talking and talking until somehow, maybe, the other person understands. But you're different. You understand that sometimes being understood requires silence first. It requires thought. It requires the other person to sit with your words long enough that they actually sink in. And that's not a flaw in your approach. That's a feature. If you can be understood through writing, through thoughtful messages, through carefully chosen words, then that's your language. That's your native tongue. Just like some people speak fluent Spanish or Mandarin, you speak fluent written word. And don't let anyone make you feel like you should become bilingual if you don't want to. Don't let anyone pressure you into voice calls when texts feel true. Don't let anyone tell you that real connection requires hearing someone's voice. Because connection is connection. Understanding is understanding. Love is love, no matter what medium carries it. That's how you love. Through words that matter, through messages that take time to compose, through the deliberate act of choosing exactly what to say instead of letting whatever tumbles out of your mouth in the moment. That's how you connect. By showing up fully in the way you know how. By being present through presence, even if it's digital presence. And the world needs more people who care enough about what they're saying to think about it first. The world needs more people like you who understand that communication isn't about speed. It's not about immediacy. It's about meaning. It's about getting it right. So, if you're someone who feels more confident in a chat than on a call, who can write a novel of emotion but stumbles over words in conversation, who finds real intimacy in the space between messages, who measures friendship not in time spent, but in quality of understanding, you're not missing out. You're not the weird one at the party. You're not broken. You're not antisocial. You're not less than. You're just speaking a language that fewer people understand. And sure, that can feel lonely sometimes. It can feel like you're the only one who thinks this way, who communicates this way, who loves this way. But the ones who do understand, they get it. They really get you. And that connection is real. It's valid. It's everything. It's the kind of connection that lasts because it's built on actual understanding, not just habit or proximity. Now ask yourself this. Are you someone who prefers messages because it's how your brain works best? Or are you hiding behind messages because the world feels too loud? Are you choosing this because you thrive in written communication? Or are you using this as an excuse to avoid the discomfort of growth? Because one is self-awareness, the other is avoidance. And only you know which one is true. Only you can be honest with yourself about whether this is your natural state or whether it's become a crutch. And that honesty matters. If it's the first, if messages are genuinely how you communicate best, then embrace it completely. Embrace it without apology. Build your connections on the foundation of written words and thoughtful communication. Find people who respect that. Find communities that value deep thinking and careful expression. There's power there, real power. There's beauty there. The kind of beauty that exists in a perfectly crafted sentence, in a response that shows someone really listened, in the mutual understanding that grows from genuine communication. Don't shrink yourself to fit into a world that values speed over substance. If it's the second, if you've realized that maybe you're using messages as a shield, then that's actually the bravest realization you can have. Maybe it's time to gently push yourself to be present in ways that scare you. Maybe it's time to make a call. Maybe it's time to sit across from someone and let the conversation happen without the safety net of a delete button. Maybe it's time to stammer through a sentence and let them hear your actual voice, not the polished version you can edit. Not because there's anything wrong with you, not because messaging is bad, but because you deserve to experience connection in all its form. You deserve to know what it feels like to be understood in real time, without editing. You deserve to grow beyond your comfort zone, not because you have to, but because growth is available to you. The beauty is that these two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. You can be someone who primarily communicates through messages and still challenge yourself to grow. You can honor how your brain works while also gently expanding what your brain can do. You can find your people who love you through text while also learning to tolerate the imperfection of spoken word. You can be exactly who you are right now and still become more. And the best relationships, the ones that actually matter, they allow for both. They allow you to show up as you are and also ask you to show up more fully when it counts. And if you want to understand the psychology that most people never hear about themselves, the psychology of the people you thought were avoiding you, but were actually just speaking a different language. The people you thought were cold, but were actually just thinking carefully. The people you thought didn't care, but were actually composing the perfect response. Then you know what to do. Keep thinking about this. Keep noticing the patterns in how you communicate. Keep asking yourself whether you're living aligned with your truth or hiding behind a story. Keep choosing people who value the way you show up, even if it's just through words on a screen. Keep building those relationships that don't require you to be anyone but yourself. Because at the end of the day, communication is about being understood. It's about having another human being really hear what you're trying to say. It's about not feeling alone in your own mind. And if messages are how you're understood best, then that's not a limitation. That's not something to apologize for. That's not a personality flaw to overcome. That's your superpower. That's your gift to the world. That's how you love. That's how you think. That's how you connect. That's your language. That's your voice. And that's enough. It's more than enough. It's everything.